Hello, Cubs, and today we are going to get to our Phantom Tollbooth reading. I just want to say how close we are to our most exciting part of our book. And remember, our book's story structure is like a mountain, right? We start at the beginning, and then we get to kind of a problem or something that starts the excitement in our story, and then we kind of climb this story mountain till we get to the very tippy top, and we call that part the climax. Now, the climax is the part where we are holding our breath, where we have no idea what it's going to happen. The most exciting part of our book, and then after the climax, that's when we kind of end our story. We have our conclusion right here, and then we have what we call falling action, which is everything that happens after that until the book is actually ended. We're getting closer and closer to that climax. We've been kind of going up, and everything's getting more and more exciting. We're finding more and more reasons why it's so important to have rhyme and reason in our book. But before we get to our new reading for today, I want us to go back to the question I asked you yesterday, which was about this question. If you only do the easiest and useless jobs, you'll never have to worry about the important ones, which are so difficult. You won't have, for there's always something to do to keep you from what you should really be doing. And so this is what I asked you guys to kind of tell me what you thought Norton Juster wanted you to learn from that quote in the book. And here are some of the choices that you guys have said. So Nishvita said, never trust a demon because they're always wasting the time of Milo, Tock, and Humbug. Okay, that's true. That's definitely what Milo, Tock, and Humbug learn. But what can we learn, Mason says, because that's the easy job. The easy job is to waste time. Sure, that's a very easy job. Srivatsa says, jobs that waste your time are easier than difficult jobs because so if you do the ones that are easier, then you don't need to do the easy jobs in your life. I'm not exactly sure what the end part is, but I understand the beginning part. It says, sorry, you don't need to do the hard jobs in your life if you're only doing the easy jobs. I think the beginning part of that is definitely true. I don't know if I would agree to the end part that you don't need to do the hard jobs in your life. And Shreya says because it's so easy. And then Sarvanch says that he wants you to learn you don't have to do the tough jobs in life. I don't know if I agree with that either. Diley says it's better to do hard work because it will make it easy. Ooh, that's different. Kaden says trust your instincts. Henry says maybe the demon is trying to teach them or show them something. And then Trinity says, same as Cadence, trust your instincts. Well, good. Those are all great answers. Again, we can all get something different from books. We do not always have to agree. So thank you so much for sharing with Miss Canterbury what you got from the book. What I get from that quote is it's easy to do things that just waste your time, that don't have a purpose. It's always going to be hard work, things that are difficult, more difficult tasks that require actual thinking are always going to be harder than those things that don't require thinking. And that's really, we're coming back to that idea of that topic that has been in this book a lot, like learning and thinking. There's been a lot of things that Norton Juster has said about learning and thinking and acquiring or getting knowledge. And here he's saying that if you don't think, not thinking, doing tasks that you don't have to think for, like, for example, washing the dishes you don't really have to think for, or I like to do it too, or like playing a video game. Those are things you don't have to really do a lot of thinking for, usually. I mean, I play video games too, so I'm not saying anything bad about video games, but those are always going to be easier tasks than tasks where you actually have to use a lot of your brain. And because you can just waste hours and hours of your time doing those easy tasks, and you don't really get anything from them. Where when you do a more difficult task, something that's a little bit harder, then your brain gets a lot more from it. And that's kind of what I get from that quote. So here we are. We're going to start with chapter 18, The Castle in the Air. And I'm really excited to start here. All right, here we go. 18, Castle in the Air. Higher and higher they climbed in search of the castle and the two banished princesses. From one crest to the next, from jagged rock to jagged rock, from frightful crumbling cliffs and along desperately narrow ledges where a single misstep meant only goodbye. Ooh, think about that. It's and narrow is really small, a narrow ledge where a single misstep, so wrong step, meant only goodbye. That's a really, think about the way that he chose to write that part. All right, let's keep going. An ominous silence dropped like a curtain around them, and except for the scuffling of their frantic footsteps, there wasn't a sound. The world that Milo knew was millions of thoughts away, and the demons were there in the distance. "They're gaining!" shouted the humbug, wishing he never looked back. "But there it is!" cried Milo in the same instant, for straight ahead, climbing up from atop the highest peak, was a spidery spiral stair, and on the other end stood the castle in the air. I see it, said the happy bug as they struggled up the twisting mountain trail. But what he didn't see was that curled up right in the front of the first step was a little round man in a frock coat, sleeping peacefully on a very large, well-worn ledger. A long quin pen sat precariously behind his ears. There were ink stains all over his hands and face, as well as his clothing. He wore the thickest pair of eyeglasses that Milo had ever seen. "Be very careful," whispered Tock when they'd finally reached the top, and the humbug stepped gingerly around and started up the stairs. "Names!" called the little man. The little man called out briskly. Just as the startled bug reached the first step, he sat up quickly, pulled the book out from under him, put on a green eye shade, and waited with his pen poised in the air. "Well, stammered the bug. "Names!" he cried again, and as he did, he opened the book to page 512 and began to write furiously. The quill made a horrible scratching noises, and the point, which was continually catching on in the paper, flicked tiny ink blots all over him. As they called out their names, he noted them carefully in alphabetical order. "Splendid, splendid, splendid," he muttered to himself. "Haven't had an M in ages." "What do you want our names for?" asked Milo, looking anxiously over his shoulder. "We're in a bit of a hurry." "Oh, this won't take a minute," the man assured them. "I'm the official census taker." And look how census is spelled. It's spelled like, smelling, sight, to smell, sight, touch, taste, hear, right? That kind of census. Now, I want to pause because there's another kind of census that starts with a C, and your parents might have actually filled that out here recently. It's something where the government is trying to figure out how many people live in an area, so they can decide how many people. It's really important actually for our country, and you can ask your parent all about the census with a C and why it's so important to our country. Okay, but that's why it's a play on words that you might not understand right now, because this census is talking about your 5 senses. But normally when we say a census taker, we talk about somebody who is helping with this big, huge census where we get information from people. All right, here we go. So let me start again. "Oh, this won't take a minute," the man assured them. "I'm the official census taker, and I must have your information before I can take your census. Now, if you'll just tell me where you were born, when you were born, where you were born, why you were born, how old you are now, how old you were then, how old you'll be in a little while, your mother's name, your father's name, your aunt's name, your uncle's name, your cousin's name, where you live, how long you've lived there, the schools you've attended, the schools you haven't attended, your hobbies, your telephone number, your shoe size, shirt size, color size, hat size, and the names and addresses of 6 people who could verify all of this information. We'll get started now. At one at a time, please. Stand in line. No pushing, no talking, no peeking." The humbug, who had difficulty remembering anything, went first. The little man leisurely recorded each answer in 5 different places, pausing often to polish his glasses, clear his throat, straighten his tie, and blow his nose. He managed to also cover the distressed bug from head to foot in ink. "Next," he announced very officially. "I do wish he'd hurry," said Milo, stepping forward. for in the distance he could see the first of the demons already beginning to scale the mountain towards them, no more than a few minutes away. The little man wrote with painful deliberation, finally finished with both Milo and Tock, and looked up happily. "May we go now?" asked the dog, whose sensitive nose had picked up a loathsome, evil smell that grew stronger by every second. "By all means," said the man agreeably, "just as soon as you finish telling me your height, your weight, the number of books you read each year, the number of books you don't read each year, the amount of time you spend eating, playing, working, and sleeping every day, where you go on vacations, how many ice cream cones you eat in a week, how far is it from your house to the barber shop, and which is your favorite color. Then after that, please fill out these forms and applications, 3 copies of each, and be careful, for if you make one mistake, you'll have to do them all over again." Pause. Do you think that this is a fair task? What do you think about this little man covered with ink? Unpause. "Oh dear," said Milo, looking at the pile of papers. "We'll never finish these." And even as he spoke, the demons swarmed stealthily up the mountain. "Come, come," said the census taker, chuckling gaily to himself. "Don't take all day. I'm expecting several more visitors any minute now." They set to work feverishly on the difficult forms, and when they'd finished, Milo placed them all in the little man's lap. He thanked them politely, took off his eye shade, put his pen behind his ear, closed the book, and went back to sleep. The humbug took one horrified look over his shoulder and quickly started up the stairs. "Destination!" shouted the census taker, sitting up again, putting on his eye shade, and taking the pen from behind his ear and opening the book. "But I thought," protested the astonished bug. "Destination," he repeated, making several notations in the ledger. "The castle in the air," said Milo impatiently. "Why bother?" said the census taker, pointing to the distance. "I'm sure you'd rather see what I have to show you." And as he spoke, they all looked up, but only Milo could see the gay, and gay means happy, the happy and exciting circus there on the horizon. There were tents and slideshows and rides and even wild animals, everything a little boy could spend hours watching. "Why don't you stop and enjoy a more pleasant aroma?" he said, turning to Tock. Almost immediately the dog smelled a wonderful smell that no one but he could smell, and it was made up of all the marvelous things that had ever delighted his curious nose. "And here's something I know you'll enjoy hearing," he assured the humbug. And the bug listened with rapt attention to something he alone could hear, the shouts and applause of an enormous crowd, all cheering for him. Each stood in a trance, as if looking, smelling, and listening to the very special things that the census taker had provided for them, forgetting completely about where they were going and who, with evil intent, was coming up behind them. The census taker sat back with a satisfied smile on his puppy little face as the demons came closer and closer, until less than a minute separated them from their helpless victims. But Milo was too engrossed in the circus to notice, and Tock had closed his eyes the better to smell, and the bug, bowing and waving, stood with a look of sheer bliss on his face, interested only in the wild ovation. The little man had done his work well, and except for some ominous crawling noises just below the crest of the mountain, everything was again silent. Milo stood staring blankly into space, let his bag... Excuse me, it's coming my sneeze in a moment. Milo, who stood staring blankly into space, let his bag of gifts slip from his shoulder to the ground, and as he did, the packages of sound broke open, filling the air with peals of happy laughter, which seemed so gay that at first he, then Tock, and finally the humbug joined in, and suddenly the spell was broken. There is no circus," cried Milo, realizing he'd been tricked. "There were no smells," barked Tock, his alarm ringing furiously. "The applause is gone," complained the disappointed humbug. I warned you I was a census taker," sneered the census taker. I help people find what they're not looking for, hear what they're not listening for, run after what they're not chasing, and smell what isn't even there. And furthermore, he cackled, hopping around gleefully on his stubby legs, I'll steal your sense of purpose, take your sense of duty, destroy your sense of proportion, and but for one thing you'd be helpless yet. What's that? Asked Milo fearfully. As long as you have the sound of laughter, he groaned unhappily, I cannot take your sense of humor, and with it, you've nothing to fear for me. But what about them? Cried the terrified Bug, for at that instant the other demons had just reached the top at last and were leaping forward to seize them. They ran for the stairs, bowling over the disconsolate census taker, ledger, ink bottle, nightshade, and all as they went. The Humbug dashed up first, then Tock, and lastly Milo, almost too late, as a scaly arm brushed his shoe. The dangerous stairs danced dizzily in the wind, and the clumsy demon refused to follow. But they howled with rage and fury, swore bloody vengeance, and watched with many pairs of burning eyes as the three small shapes vanished slowly into the clouds. Don't look down, advised Milo as the Bug tottered upward on unsteady legs. Like a giant corkscrew, that means it kind of goes like this. The stairway twisted through the darkness, steep and narrow, with no rail to guide them. The wind howled cruelly with an effort to tear them loose, and the fog dragged clammy fingers down their backs. But up the giddy flight they went, each one helping the others, until at last the clouds parted, the darkness fell away, and the glow of the golden sun rays warmed their arrival. The castle gate swung smoothly open, and on the rug, as soft as a snowdrift, they entered the great hall, and they stood shyly waiting. So we're going to pause there. That's where we're going to stop today, as we reach the castle in the air. And today what I want to hear about from you is, what do you think of the census taker? What do you think of the census taker? Do you think he is a demon? Or do you think he is something else? That's the question. And what was his purpose? If he's something else, what was the purpose of him? What is the purpose? Like, what's the reason behind him? All right. What was he trying to do? All right, guys. Thanks for listening to the Phantom Tollbooth with me.